What's up, everybody? It's Monday, and you know what that means by now. It's Mock Draft Monday here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Plus, we're going to talk about if Kevin O'Connell will want to keep Kirk Cousins. We're going to speculate on all of that here on the show.
Ooh-wee! You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL, shows on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen every single day. Going to be especially hype this week. Tell you about that in a second. First, today's episode is brought to you by Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. This is going to be a really cool week on this show because your favorite kid to copy off of in math class is going to the Super Bowl. I'm going to be at Radio Row talking to players and stuff. Hopefully, if there are interviews that are relevant to the Vikings, you'll hear them here on Locked On Vikings. But I'm going to be doing a lot. I'm going there as a representative of the Locked On NFL podcast, which I do every Tuesday, by the way. And so Ross and I, Tuesday hosts on Locked On NFL, we'll go do a little wrap-up show at the end of every day, and we're going to do a bunch of interviews. You might hear me all over the Locked On Podcast Network if you listen to that kind of stuff. But anything relevant to you guys, I'll of course share here. Super exciting stuff this week. But we still have a stupid purple team to cover, and I'm going to talk to you about them. The first thing is going to be the last thing, and that's Mock Draft Monday. This Monday, we're going to do a mock draft every time. That'll be at the end of the show, so stick around for that. But the real first thing we're going to talk about is Kirk Cousins. We're going to do a little bit of talk. We're going to speculate some about Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell. I'm going to go with conflicting reports over what Cousins and O'Connell's, like the nature of their relationship and whether or not, the central question here is, are the Vikings going to keep Kirk Cousins? Really, the central question is, should they keep Kirk Cousins? We're going to attack that at a later date. I want to gather some more information. I want to maybe rewatch some tape. I want to really, really, really put my ducks in a row before I attack that question. There's, of course, the question of what's his contract like. I'll do that briefly, but we'll go into more details later. But really, the speculation is, what are they going to do? Forget what they should do. What are they actually leaning toward right now? And is that informative? Whatever, we'll talk about it. But first, I guess, I don't know. This is kind of more of a Kevin O'Connell episode than a Kirk Cousins episode. And we understand what Kirk is and the way his brain works and the kind of quarterback he is. And it's really just a question of if you like that or not. With Kevin O'Connell, that's like a weirdly hard question to answer. Because, everybody's been, kind of cagey about the whole thing. And of course they are, right? Including reporters. Basically, every report that we have seen has been, I'm going to go as somebody a Twitter follower put it really well, informed speculation. It's not a report, but it's an educated guess, and they're educated in ways that, you and I can't be because we're not insiders. I guess the biggest example of that comes from Adam Schefter. Let me read you a quote from Adam Schefter, who said this on ESPN, who said, Kevin O'Connell worked with Kirk Cousins in Washington. We all know that. Kirk Cousins endorsed Kevin O'Connell for that job. One of the reasons Kevin wants that kind of job is because of Kirk Cousins. There's a relationship. And then he went on later to say, so that tells me Minnesota and Kirk Cousins will figure out something and maybe come up with a restructured contract that adds years on for Kirk Cousins and gives the Vikings salary or cap relief this offseason to give them more money to spend on other players. So that would, of course, be, if they are keeping Kirk Cousins, that would, of course, be the plan. So let's dive into that a little bit. It's very clear. This is not reports, hey, Vikings intend to keep Kirk Cousins. Even if it was, the fat lady hasn't sung yet. There are a lot of steps to go through before that can actually happen. Now, if you are somebody who really wants to keep Kirk Cousins, here are the steps that need to be taken. For one, everybody in the room has to decide, yeah, we want to keep doing this. Now, Kirk Cousins, on record, clearly wants to continue to be a Minnesota Viking. That's not going to be a problem. But also, Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah want to keep Kirk Cousins. I'm going to guess that they're both aligned on that. I don't think the Wilfs would hire two people on opposite sides of that issue. But obviously they have to decide to, like, that's a big part of it. And then the other part is they got to get the contract worked out. And that's tough. The contract right now, I mean, of course, Kirk Cousins is a $45 million cap hit. We're going to go with untenable there, right? Like that's not feasible, especially because if you're keeping Kirk Cousins in the building, it's because you're making a run at this thing, and you're not going to make a run at this thing with a $45 million cap hit on your quarterback. I don't think anybody thinks you can do that. Even me, who's like the king of the salary cap is fake if you're good at it. Even though, okay, that's a bridge too far, right? So, of course, that needs to change. And the way that that would change would be some sort of extension that converts a bunch of that $45 million cap hit into signing bonus, therefore prorating it over the life of whatever the new contract is. So if you extend him 3 more years, it's a 4-year deal. You turn $20 million of his 45 into signing bonus. That means $5 million, $5 million, $5 million, $5 million over the 4 years. And then suddenly you knocked $15 million off of his cap hit. That's how you have to do this. The thing is, that means you have to come to an agreement with Kirk Cousins. And what is Kirk Cousins' value right now? Do these new people see him in the same light as, okay, this guy is a franchise quarterback that can take us to a Super Bowl? That's the way Rick Spielman saw it and George Payton back in the day. And I guess not Mike Zimmer? Who cares? That's the way the Vikings brass saw it. This guy can take us to a Super Bowl. He's a franchise quarterback. And if you think of that guy, forgetting Kirk Cousins, think of a guy who you think of as a franchise quarterback that can take you to a Super Bowl. Don't even... Joe Burrow, right? Matt Stafford. There's the guys who are actually in it, right? Just don't even make it hard on yourself. What's that guy worth? There's kind of not a price too high. That's the way I see the quarterback position. A quarterback that can take you to a Super Bowl ring, there is no price too high. So if you think that about Kirk Cousins, you're going to be fine with, pay everything out the nose. A guy like that theoretically can make it around, the roster problems that cap hits create and all that stuff. And of course, we get into the debate with Kirk Cousins there, but that's not what we're here to do. The point is, what they would have to do is work out that deal. And so any speculation right now is only kind of telling us, yeah, I think they feel good enough about it to try. And that's no guarantee. So we've got a lot of work to do here, and there's a lot of time between now and March 16th when the league year turns over, at which point something will have to be done. We don't really know what that thing is. I do want to talk a little bit more about O'Connell himself and his relationship with Kirk and kind of, I don't know, the way I read those tea leaves, but you might read them differently, but I guess I want to at least share that. But first, raise your hand if you've given up on your New Year's resolutions. Maybe you fell off the wagon. Maybe you want to try to get back on, or maybe you've given up. Either way, a Built Bar would be great because they taste like a candy bar and they are absolutely delicious. Have you even tried Built Puffs? They are like the greatest ones. They're protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. Think about a chocolate-covered candy bar with marshmallow in it. But that counts as a protein bar. They don't feel like it feels like a treat, but it's 100%. It's a protein bar. They're a fan favorite with some incredible flavors like cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. They're phenomenal, and they're going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars, again, covered in 100% chocolate. Yes, the puffs included. They're low calorie, high protein. Whenever you eat a candy bar, replace it with this. They are absolutely delicious. Go to Built.com and scroll down the macros chart. If you're into that kind of thing, you will be blown away. High protein, low cal, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars are 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. It's Super Week, brought to you by Get Upside, and there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams are also in LA all week covering the big game, and yes, that includes yours truly, so come check me out on the Locked On NFL podcast, but go check out Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams too. We talked to both of them this year. They're, of course, all great. Go check all of that out. Let's talk a little bit about, speaking of the Rams, Kevin O'Connell. So Kevin O'Connell has some philosophies. We talked about that on Friday. Go check that out for a broader overview. But when it comes to Kirk Cousins specifically, it's a little harder to find out what he thinks of quarterbacks, because whenever you ask a coach about their quarterback, they're going to just gas the guy up. So he gassed up Dwayne Haskins. Does that mean he likes quarterbacks like Dwayne Haskins? Probably not, right? And he gassed up, then he said great things about Jared Goff and now Matt Stafford. It's he's just going to say nice things about his quarterback, right? So it's difficult to actually glean important and actually informative insights about what he likes in a quarterback. But I can at least glean what he likes in an offense, and you can kind of talk about like how his and Kirk Cousins' relationship went. Now, the Adam Schefter quote is interesting because he says like, yeah, these two have a relationship, which wasn't in anybody else's report. So like that, I feel like is informative, that these two like do have like an ongoing relationship and they like each other, blah, blah, blah. That of course ups the odds that these guys try to work something out. And if they want to work something out, I think they're going to be able to. What that contract actually is and the amounts and all that stuff, we just kind of have to wait to see. But I guess the point is, how do we determine if Kevin O'Connell himself likes Kirk Cousins, and if Kwesi Adofo-Mensah feel about Kirk Cousins? There was a Star Tribune article that came out over the weekend, I believe it was Ben Gessling, about that went inside all the stuff with Jim Harbaugh, which, by the way, it kind of confirmed, and there was an Athletic piece too that kind of said the same thing. It kind of confirmed that Jim Harbaugh thought that he was going to be anointed with the job. He was sort of put off that the Vikings were going to like think about it, like that they might have given him the job ultimately, but they wanted to sleep on it and circle back and really huddle up on the thing. And Jim Harbaugh kind of wanted you to be sold on me immediately. And that incongruity in that kind of difference in expectation, I think put a sour note on the whole thing. And he went, yeah, we're not going to work together well for 5 years, y'all. Like, this is not going to work. And then they all kind of went their separate ways. That, if you're worried about the Harbaugh thing still. But with O'Connell, part of it was that he had a plan for the offense that they liked. And it really does seem like, and this is going to make a lot of you very happy, it does seem like Kevin O'Connell having an offensive plan and being an offensive guy was kind of a kicker over Patrick Graham and Raheem Morris. And Harbaugh was his own thing. But those were the 4 finalists, and it seemed like Kevin O'Connell, being an offensive guy, having a plan for the offense, and the way Gessling put it was giving special insight into the most important decision. I believe I quoted that correctly, which is the most important offseason decision, which is the Kirk Cousins decision. And that's strangely non-committal, but I don't want to like get caught up in like reading too much into the wording of an article that like is talking about something else, because that article was mostly about Harbaugh and mostly about like why they picked O'Connell over Harbaugh, and the other 2 finalists. But either way, he worked with Kirk Cousins in 2017. And if you look at who Kirk Cousins was in 2017, look, that's the same year that convinced the Vikings to sign Kirk Cousins in the first place in the 2018 offseason. He was coming off that very same year. So whatever you think of that year, it was clearly good enough to win people over. And here's where I'm going to get into this. I talked about this with Kevin O'Connell way back when he was just a ghost of like one of many people they had decided to go interview. And I put him in an episode that was like, guys, I don't want them to hire. And part of that was his brain, Kevin O'Connell's approach to problem solving in the game and stuff like that is the same as Kirk Cousins. And it's really difficult for me to see these two guys getting in a room trying to prepare for a team and not seeing the game exactly the same way. And that's why I have the feeling that they are going to try to work things out with Kirk Cousins. Now, again, they can only try, and that's what the whole first segment was about. But I feel like they're gonna, because even though, I think Judd Zulgad said, look, just because they have a prior relationship doesn't mean that O'Connell is like priced into keeping this guy, like understanding who Kirk is might work against him as much as it works for him and blah, blah, blah. And that's true. And maybe, but they just have the same mind. There are think pieces around about Kevin O'Connell and his very quick rise, because apparently he got like some weird head coach looks last year too. So he kind of was seen as a quick riser in the league. And that's the kind of guy the Wolves were looking for. And part of that was he has this very meticulous approach to the game, this very detail oriented and a lot of information gathering. I'm sure that played well with Kwesi. He has, buckets on buckets of notes, and he has, notebooks filled and blah, blah, blah. And when I read that, my mind immediately went to Kirk Cousins, who has the same thing. He's got bins on bins of notebooks filled that he keeps, and he regularly references go all the way back to Michigan State, where he played against this guy, he played against this defensive coordinator who's now coaching in the NFL, and he can go bring up the time he played that guy in the Big Ten. That is the kind of thing that Kirk Cousins does. Is the kind of thing that Kevin O'Connell does. And I think they have to like respect that about each other, right? So that tells me that it's kind of the thing. Now, schematically, if the thing about Kevin O'Connell about like rhythm passing is a big deal. He likes quick game in terms of getting the quarterback into a rhythm. And he also likes making the quarterback feel protected. And so I could see them talking themselves into this world. And I've heard this a bajillion times from people who are diehard Kirk defenders who would agree with this wholeheartedly. So it's certainly not a unique thing that it's, look, Kirk Cousins, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but I will say the take, and I quote, Kirk Cousins hasn't had the opportunity to really thrive in the Vikings because he hasn't been nurtured by the head coach. He hasn't had protection. He hasn't had play calling that's adequate. And I could see Kevin O'Connell coming in and saying, and I could give him all of that stuff. You know, we'll make sure the quarterback is protected. We'll bring in a bunch of extra protection. We'll make sure those are set. We'll make that a priority. We'll make offensive line a priority. We'll get him into the rhythm with quick game. We'll really protect him. Make him feel like he's not out there on his own. And you could maybe, like, if you really wanted to defend Kirk Cousins, you could say, well, he's been out there. He's on an island. He's out there in the rain doing the best he can. But obviously there's all these things working against him. What if you took those things away? What does he become then? And I'm not very sympathetic to that argument, to be honest with you. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, you've probably heard that too many times, so I won't give it to you. But I will say, in all fairness, Matt Stafford's in the Super Bowl, and he got the same choruses forever and ever and ever. I'm not saying the Vikings should go pull a Rams and trade all their future first round picks for random, superstar veterans or whatever. But it at least is proof of concept that it can be done. And so I don't know what the Vikings plan is, and I can't critique it until I've seen it and I've seen where they go in the offseason. And look, we'll have that conversation in, July or August when it's closer and we know kind of the general texture of the roster. And we can say, do I like this or not? But for now, because of the way that Kevin O'Connell approaches the game, it's really easy for me to see him sticking with Kirk Cousins without even considering the fact that they've worked together before. They just seem like compatible dudes, and that goes a long way in this league. So that's why, if I were to guess, I would guess that they try to keep Kirk Cousins. Will they? Who knows? Maybe they never get a contract worked out, and it all works out the same way. There was some weird whisper. I don't know. I had like 3 people DM me that there was a whisper that they were going to trade Kirk Cousins to Cleveland or something. I couldn't verify it or even find the source of it or the origin of it. So I don't know where that's at, but that's something. But I've already blabbered on about this way too much. Let's go on to Mock Draft Monday, which is way more exciting. But first, let me tell you about my new favorite app. It is Get Upside. It is a free app. It saves you money on gas. What more could you want in an app? Just download the app. When you sign up, enter promo code TOUCHDOWN. It'll show you participating gas stations in your area. And then you go to those, fill up, take a picture of your receipt. It might ask you. And then you just get free money back. That's cash back. And then that's just free money that you can just download or you can deposit in your bank whenever you want. Or you can get it like a Google Play or an Amazon gift card if you're better with that. That's it. That's the whole app, and it's very good. That's all I can say about it. You can get up to 25 cents per gallon back. If you drive a lot, that's like $300-400 a year. That's pretty insane. 25 cents per gallon or more cash back when you enter promo code TOUCHDOWN. That's 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank for entering promo code TOUCHDOWN at the Get Upside app. Free on the Google Play or App Store. All right, it is time for the Mock Draft Monday Simulator. I'm here looking at the Pro Football Network Mock Draft Simulator. We are doing this the same way we've done it before. So that means we've got a few rules. First off, I cannot take anybody that I have taken before. So I've taken Devin Lloyd before. I took Derek Stingley once. I can't take those guys. I'm off limits. I got to pick somebody new every time. And the other rule is I am also only doing one round for now. I probably will only do one round until I'm more interested in learning the texture of the board. And I am doing trade offers. I didn't like any of their trade offers this time, so I'm not going to do them. So we are going to continue to pick at 12, and there are a few people we can look at. A bunch of them are taken, which kind of sucks. There's Matt Corral and Sam Howell are on the board here, and these quarterbacks are going to start to rise. This is what always happens in a bad quarterback year. You kind of go, the quarterbacks are bad, and then they all kind of, maybe you're thinking they're going to go at the end of the first round or something, and then suddenly like 3 of them have a good pro day, and then they rise and they all go top 10. This is what happened in like 2016. A lot of people were like, yeah, Jared Goff's good and Carson Wentz are good, but like, should they really go in the top 10? And then after an impressive pro day, especially from Wentz, who's like a freak, then suddenly, those two guys really, really rose. Or 2019 was the same way. There was Murray. He was always going to go number 1 overall. But behind him, Daniel Jones or like Dwayne Haskins, and these guys were like not that exciting. And then suddenly Jones goes 6th and Haskins goes 15th. So these quarterbacks are going to rise. But for now, they are on the board. I just spent a whole episode talking about how the Vikings are going to keep Kirk Cousins. So I don't think I'm going to keep him. Let's go with something a little bit more exciting than that. I am going to take a safety. Kyle Hamilton was off the board. Unfortunately, he almost made it. He went 10th to the Jets. But and maybe I would have traded up. If Kyle Hamilton was at 10, I would have tried to trade up, even if he was at like 8 or 9. But I think I'm going to go with a different one. Let's take a Michigan guy. Let's take somebody away from Jim Harbaugh in revenge, of course, for him slighting us. Daxton Hill is just a freak. We're going to take the safety out of Michigan, Daxton Hill. So for one, of course, safety's in need, right? Xavier Woods is an unrestricted free agent, and Cameron Bynum, as exciting as he was, I don't know, do you want to trust him that? Like, how much do you want to trust him? Safety's probably more of a 3rd or 4th round position. I think that's a position battle to me between Bynum and a rookie. But let's take one in the 1st round to have a little bit of fun. So he is going to absolutely explode the combine. He had a really high spark rating in the 2019 recruiting class. I'm looking at Pro Football Network's kind of basic summary for that information. But basically he's got like all sorts of physical traits, and he is a total raw project. And here's the deal. That means that's like a perfect person to bring in for competition with Cam Bynum. So that means we run the risk of our 1st round pick not starting all of his rookie year. Now, everybody went completely up in arms over a 3rd round pick in Wyatt Davis not starting in his rookie year. So a 1st round pick would probably be a pretty bad look. But again, the draft is a long-term thing. You don't need to look at what they did in their rookie year and pretend that that's all they're ever going to be. Guys grow. So this is a guy that just needs to learn like pattern recognition and, be a little bit more consistent in run defense, especially in the physical parts of run defense and taking better angles and stuff like that. And when he is drafted, he will be 20 years old. So this is very much a young super freak kind of prospect that needs to learn the game. So I think I'll probably decide how I feel about this when I know who the D-backs coach is. Who's going to be coaching this dude up, and do I trust that guy? So I don't know. This is just, this exercise is a way to get to know the player, not necessarily a list of guys I endorse. I'm just kind of picking dudes and seeing how I feel about them later. But I think he's going to be a big time numbers guy. He's going to blow up the combine, and he might even become like a top 10, top 5 prospect on those numbers. You know how those guys always tend to rise. So if he does fall to 12, it might just be one of these guys with so much upside you can't let him go. And hey, look, safety's a position of need. So let's see if we can't figure something out there. Plus, even if, you feel like, well, that's kind of a logjam though. If maybe you're the biggest Cameron Bynum fan in the world and you think, well, Bynum can start though, so shouldn't we get somebody else? Harrison Smith is going to retire in a year or two. Like, that's around the corner. So you're going to need a safety. And remember, the draft is a future thing. The way I think of draft needs, by the way, I've got a minute, so I'm going to put this out. The way I think of draft needs is, think of the needs you're going to have next year, not the needs you have this year. And the needs you have this year are also probably the needs you have next year. So like, maybe that works out fine anyways, but think of the needs you're going to have next year. They are going to need a safety soon, wide receiver. They're going to need to replace Thielen soon. The needs that you are going to have next year. This is, I think, maybe the rationale behind the Chaz Surratt pick. And I don't love the pick at all, of course. And all those guys are going to get canned over it. But that was supposed to try to be an Anthony Barr replacement, because Anthony Barr replacement is going to be a need next year. And now look, here it is, a need. We need a linebacker. And we need a linebacker because the Chaz Surratt pick worked out. But if it had, or because the Surratt pick didn't work out, but if it had, we wouldn't have that need, right? And that was kind of the positional thing. So think about the needs you're going to have next year and open up that list that much, and you kind of start to see, okay, positional values, whatever, we kind of need everything. So yeah, I could get behind the idea of drafting like a super athletic safety as long as I trust the coaching staff to coach him up. we'll figure it out. I'll talk to y'all tomorrow. It is Twitter Tuesday. I'll get to your mailbag questions. I'll shove an interview in there as well if we have one that's good that I want to share with you. So we'll do that. Send a question to Locked On Vikings on Twitter or Luke Braun NFL on Twitter. There's an email, lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. You can send a question to, or you can always just fill out the Google form that's in the show notes if you would rather. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.